If you can't name the problem, you can't fix it. And
Yeah.
so a lot of other countries, 59 in this first meeting, got together and decided to have their own COP with fossil fuels in the conversation.
59, that's a lot.
Yeah,
Welcome to Climate Basics, a podcast about the global energy transition and the challenges countries face, presented in an optimistic and realistic light. Here are your hosts, Ty and Greg, and please remember to like and subscribe.
Hi, Ty.
hey Greg.
Ty, we have some interesting developments in the midst of the Strait of Hormuz and all the difficulties that arise from that. Some good news. Some proactive countries, a significant number, got together and recently had an important meeting and what seems to be the first of hopefully many of these meetings. Maybe you can explain the name, which is not a great acronym, it doesn't seem like, but also what this initiative is and how it got together and what it's doing.
Sure thing. So essentially, everyone was a bit disappointed in COP last year, where there were so many people from the fossil fuel industry influencing the discourse that we ended up having official documents that didn't mention fossil fuels being an issue in a giant international meeting about climate change.
That's just a small overlook, eh? Just a small
Uh,
detail.
if you can't name the problem, you can't fix it. And
Yeah.
so a lot of other countries, 59 in this first meeting, got together and decided to have their own COP with fossil fuels in the conversation.
59, that's a lot.
Yeah. Remember, there's only 200 some countries in the entire world, and some were obviously not going to participate for one reason or another. The United States, for example, India, China, they are essentially petrol states, just like some of the UAE, Saudi Arabia. Uh, those guys weren't a part of this conversation. And also, unlike COP, this wasn't built on consensus, but on impact, on actually getting policies out there and getting rules out there and starting to change the economy.
Fantastic.
So, so, more than half of the global GDP was represented in this.
Wow.
Yeah. So by one type of number, already more than half the world is on board and represented at this meeting. And there's going to be another one. This first one was in Colombia, hosted by Colombia and I think the Netherlands. Next year is going to be in Tuvalu, co-hosted with Ireland.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
there's a promo. Let's check out the video.
Sure. And so the name of this is TAFF, or the acronym TAFF, and that was the screen right
Right.
behind you.
The conference on transitioning away from fossil fuels. So the TAFF conference, the first one.
Right. Ah,
This was just 2 weeks ago in Colombia.
okay.
Let's see what they said.
The world has darkened of late by the clouds of war, injustice, and rising seas. A sickness now spreads that envelops all within its grasp, to the ultimate desolation of species once numerous and noble. We have forgotten that we belong to one another. Yet, a solitary beacon burns bright at the far edge of the map. Far from the grand cities of the American giant and the ancient castles and splendor of Europe, there lies a vast blue continent. More ocean than land, more tide than border, more memory than monument. Far from places that have long held power, from structures who have steered us deeper into the storm, stands a lighthouse for humankind. Here, the horizon is not an end but a promise. Here, the pulse of the earth is still felt in the turning of the currents, in the breath of reefs, in the stories of old carried by wind and wave. Tuvalu, where the ocean is both cradle and thread, where a promise of a new world is kindled and where hope now gathers. not in towers of glass or halls of empire, but on fragile ground that knows what is truly at stake. From this place of spirit as vast as the Moana grows a defiance that will not be drowned, where we will quiet the engines of fire and guard the Eden bequeathed to us by God Almighty. We fight with all our breath not to sink beneath the waves because we choose life. Life over extraction, futures over profit, people over power. We choose life for our children we have yet come to know. For the earth that will one day will receive our bodies. To replenish the world upon which they will grow. So let the world come. To listen. To reckon. To change. For here, where the tides are rising, our will to resist rises higher. Here, in our Moana, we make our stand. For if we save the Pacific, we most definitely will save the world.
Okay, so yeah, that seems to be entirely just about Tuvalu being the next location it's going to be hosted.
Right?
The interesting thing about that is I've seen some reports arguing that already the number of people that showed up in Colombia, fairly short notice, they put this together all since COP essentially, since last year. Uh, if they had the same numbers as the first and we're expecting larger, there's not enough hotel rooms on that island to host everybody. So I think it's going to be a logistics thing. I
Right.
know Ireland is supposed to have kind of like a pre-meeting before the main one. Maybe a lot of people will show up to Ireland and send just everybody's bosses to Tuvalu, I suppose.
Right.
Maybe something like that.
I think in events past, if they dock like a small cruise ship or some sort of ship like that, that might be one way as well. But yeah,
Oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
that was an impressive video. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it got the point across. That is what we're talking about.
Right.
The whole world going extinct or not. I mean, no biggie, but us having collectively as a global society a functional response to climate change really does make a huge difference for the quality of lives of all of our children, as the video said.
Right. Yeah, and so I think the natural reaction when you've paid attention to the UN or read the news for decades is that, oh, another meeting. But I think that meetings like this actually are very helpful because the COP has grown to a point where it is unwieldy. I think there has been commentary upon that for well over a decade that it's just so large, so unwieldy that lots of vendors show up and that sort of thing. And to have the ability for 57, 58 countries to meet an extra time and then try to do some extra work, I think that's very valuable, particularly if they know where the next meeting is, what time and what they're working towards. I think it's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've already seen some really great results from this. They established kind of their modus operandi as an organization. They have a committee now that's going to interface with the organizations coming from the UN and COP and the other big global bodies that have been talking about this and try to basically collaborate as much as possible. Basically, COP is too slow because it operates on collective consensus of all parties, and there's so many parties that somebody is going to be influenced enough by oil to, make that demand that the things get edited out, and you end up having a softer and softer and less effective new set of policies over time. The
Yes.
idea here is these guys can be the spearhead, can be the ones in the avant-garde of the just transition
Right.
globally.
Right.
And then as what they do is shown to be more safe and profitable, everyone else, even the petrol states, is going to jump on board over time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. And so the next one in a year?
No, not even. They're going to do it in the spring, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what are you looking at here? You're looking at doc
One of the reports, one of the collaborating organizations for a long term time, there's been a organization trying to put together a global fossil fuel treaty, and so they were one of the ones there and reporting on it. Uh, this is an article you can find, guys, if you go to fossilfueltreaty.org.
Gotcha.
So this is just them talking about what was discussed at the conference. I think the main thing to take away. Uh, there are three basic demands coming out of the first conference that everyone agreed on in TAFF. First, stop expanding oil production, moratorium on new development. Second, stop subsidizing it, making it artificially cheaper and allowing corporations to basically steal taxpayer money to fill their own pockets. Instead of, for example, in Europe, there was a lot of protests a while back because the EU tried to decrease the amounts of subsidies for diesel, which meant everyone's tractor fuel got more expensive, which meant angry farmers across from Netherlands to France all riding in the highway and demanding you bring back our oil subsidies.
Yeah, that's not a
But
good
there,
thing.
but there's a way around that. Take some of the money that you are no longer subsidizing oil with directly and instead give it to the farmers, especially with some bonuses if you use that money to make a transition to, say, an electric tractor,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Well, it's interesting. So in terms of the participants, too many countries to name, but there are obviously some fossil fuel producers here. So
Yeah,
my
yeah,
home of Canada, we attended this, so I don't know whether or not. I don't know what came out of TAFF, but Australia is there as well, Brazil. Bangladesh. These are large countries. France, Germany, of course. The
yeah,
Nordic countries are all represented there. Mexico is a large
yep,
country. And then you've got Portugal, you've got Turkey, you've got the UK. So yeah, this was well attended. Vietnam as well. So
absolutely.
yeah, so
No, these are re real parts of the global economy with
right,
hundreds of millions of people living there.
right,
This is going
yeah,
to be a big impact. And even outside of the green transition, I hope what we're starting to see here is kind of leadership from the middle instead of from the center.
yes,
Not the richest nor the poorest being the driver, but kind of like the silent majority of nations and societies, all the little guys that actually can make much faster changes to their economies because that are only the size of, say, Portugal or Greece or Uruguay,
that's
right?
right.
When you're a
Yes,
smaller, medium-sized country, you can get your entire energy grid on renewables with just a few projects.
yeah.
It's a lot easier to see through than it is if you're one of these giant nation states like the US or China.
Yes, that's right. So yeah, so China and the United States and Russia and India, they did not attend. But yeah, but otherwise it was well attended by developed nations. I forgot to mention Italy. I forgot to mention Nigeria. Of course, there are many others other than the countries named, but those are some of the bigger ones.
And some of those are, as you said, oil producers. Nigeria is the top oil producer for Africa.
Yes,
So it's not that we everyone who showed up just wants to stop it all tomorrow. A lot
yes,
of the conversation and a lot of the long-term organizing and policy research is about how to make sure that the transition is just, both in terms of workers and communities and in terms of the global South versus the previously colonial empires.
right. I think it's very useful for a large group of countries to say, we've got to hurry this thing up. We have to try harder. And COP is great, but let's do something else. And so I think this is great. I think it's just really all positive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as we start seeing the impacts from this document and from this organization ripple out and start impacting how we think about regenerative and sustainable development globally, I think we'll really start seeing some some important conversations starting to happen finally in the right places. Now that somebody has said out loud, we need to stop expanding oil, we need to stop subsidizing oil, and we need to start thinking about how we make that financially, organizationally, industrially, how we make that transition for each sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so it's interesting that this went ahead and did not get canceled in the middle of this Strait of Hormuz crisis, because of course that is a crisis for many countries, including countries in Asia. So, some of the attendees here, Philippines, Singapore,
Some of them are experiencing oil scarcity already. Some of them are
exactly.
rationing their use.
That's right.
Uh, this is not only it's not only a matter of responsibility to the globe. It's also a matter of national sovereignty and security for some people. And
Right.
for others, it's about being a part of the new economy rather than the old one.
Right. And for those countries particularly, although I think all countries are affected, the old adage of never waste a good crisis, right? So in
Hmm.
crisis, you have the momentum for some sort of change. And so you generally have public opinion that's more willing to accept some changes. And so, big plans to install renewable energy, this might be sort of a more receptive time for any country to embark upon that than say the previous decade, really. It's a crisis which is hitting everybody today. It's hitting their pocketbooks. So if you have a path forward, if you have a plan to mitigate against these high costs, then maybe you're going to get a very warm reception from the public opinion at large.
Yeah, yeah, and you kind of need public will to be with you for such a huge transition, regardless of what it is.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, well, it's nice to be able to credibly, substantially point to some good news coming out of the Strait of Hormuz, because, of
The-
course, that's just all bad. But
no, I think as that incredible journalist that we had on recently said, Hormuz is long term going to have a positive impact because it reminded so many people how precarious dependency on fossil fuels inherently is.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, big structural changes. And I thought Jonathan Mingle, the journalist, reminding everybody that the 1973 oil embargo produced a whole raft of changes, like the Department of Energy, standards of car efficiency, um, I think speed limits on the highways, and funding of solar, funding of nuclear expansion, funding of wind research and development. All of those things arose from the 1973 embargo. And then, of course, you fast forward 40, 50 years, you cannot imagine a world without, some of those amendments and changes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Very well done. Thank you, Ty.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Climate Basics podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave us your comments. We look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.